Yeah. So interestingly, what's happening in the field of leadership is the switch towards agile methodologies slash Scrum, and this is kind of a broad term for that encompasses a lot of things, but basically, yeah, describe agile as short production cycles producing value at each iteration. And so what that means is every sprint, and a sprint can be, a month, we produce some value. The value doesn't only come at the end; it comes as we go. And so, what do I mean by that? Typically, we talk about these. We talk about Agile, Scrum in terms of software projects, and so essentially, if we have a software project, before we used to map it out entirely beforehand. We used to have this big plan, and we'd plan it out well in advance, and generally it would never go according to plan. And there's some statistic, the success rate of projects, it's around 20%, which is it's very, very minimal. And switching towards more what are called agile methodologies, which means having your work set out in smaller increments and delivering value each time. So how you operationalize that in terms of a software product is you put out an initial release which has very basic functionalities, and then you add modules to it. You add functionalities as you go along based on what the customer wants. And this is also a big shift in thinking, because often people from technological fields, it's the fallacy of when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They've got this tool, they've got this approach that they want to bring to the world, and nobody wants it, or they haven't convinced people of its value yet. And so instead of aiming first to provide value for the customer, they're trying to put out their fancy new gadget or gidget or whatever. And so switching to agile, it's more, I wouldn't call that agile, but it's really just a switch in thinking. So in like Jamie Wheel, he talks about this in his book Recapture the Rapture. There's several conventional paradigms, and like he goes through it in terms of different disruptive or even revolutionary authors. Even though they're quite recent, their impact hasn't been totally seen yet. But for example, the conventional paradigm in terms of mindset, it's the fixed mindset. And the work of Carol Dweck, it's the growth mindset, and it's showing the advantage of that. So normally, we look at we look at our skills as fixed things. Like you say, like you can, like I get this all the time. I talk, like I mentioned that I'm doing like physics or math or something like that, and people say, "Oh, I'm not good at math. I was never good at math," and it's become so internalized that they're quote unquote not good at math, and I don't know what started that. Maybe it was it could be extremely contingent on like some initial priming. Like maybe their very first math test, they made a few mistakes, and so they got labeled as like stupid in math, and then that just propagated from there. People have talked about some, I guess, more basically genetic effects on intelligence as operationally measured by IQ. I do think there's some element to that. Um, I think one important caveat with that work is that our dominant cultural story is the fixed mindset, and you that might be people might disagree with that, but if you think of like self-development books, what percentage of the population are they read by? If you think of if you look at it from the book's point of view, like these books are going to a small sliver of the population, and generally, yeah, it's I don't know what it is, but it's probably Pareto distributed, where there's like 20% of the population reads 80% of the books, and probably like 1% reads like half, maybe something like that. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, anyways, our dominant cultural story is one of the fixed mindset, and the post-conventional way is the growth mindset. And so this is actually believing that there's a possibility to grow, that experiencing struggle is not a condemnation of you at your current skill level. It's an opportunity to grow beyond that. And how you make that practical, like her advice for providing encouragement, say for children, is to not praise the result, or the quote unquote innate attributes of the child, for example, and say, you're so smart. Say, oh, I really admire your determination, and on that assignment, and getting that done. And so really, we're looking to, we're not looking to just sort of passively act on the world, and we stay the same. We go into interface, into relation with the world, in order for it provides us challenges that are the fuel for us to grow. And yeah, that's ultimately why we do things. And yeah, that was just an example of a conventional to post-conventional. The other examples are, say, paradox, or you have a dialectic. Say it's right and left politically, or conservative, liberal, and people have talked about how this is known. It's not a very valid way of seeing the world, or it's a very limited view of seeing the world. But basically, there's for each side, you can make an archetypal good and an archetypal bad. So like on the right side, like the archetypal good is like, it would be something like the wise king, the patriarch who his judgment, his wisdom, like others benefit from that. He provides a structure for that allows stability for people to actually grow, and not fear predation from outside. And the negative side of that is just like the controlling, like basically an abusive partner. You know, he prevents you from talking to people. Doesn't want you reading stuff. Wants to keep you stupid and like chained to the radiator, basically, like as the old thing, as the old cliche goes. And like on the left side, or the I guess authoritarian and anti-authoritarian. On the anti-authoritarian side, there's like, the positive aspect of that is the artist who's they're creating, they're innovating, they're bringing new life into the world, and they're breaking down things that whose time has come to be broken down. Like revolutionaries of old, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, or like any number of creative artist types who totally revolutionized art and in that the way we see the world. And then the shadow side of that would just be, it'd be like the total degenerate, like the person who they got caught up in drugs, and it just like totally it took over their lives, and they just had no discipline, no structure, no control. And yeah, it's like you see them, and it's just you're just like in shock and horror. And so what the new paradigm, it's not choosing one or the other. It's choosing the strengths of both, and moving through it, as gracefully as we can. And so how we can identify that is we understand that we're moving around this landscape of, in this example, authority, anti-authority, or authority/individualism, however you want to conceive it. And within that we have the positive aspects and the negative aspects. And say when we dip into the negative aspects, we set warning signs, like in this case, I'll term these pathologies of control, or pathologies of order, and pathologies of chaos. And there's also the positives of chaos and the positives of order. So, a pathology of control would be China. Like if you've seen the footage come out of like the lockdown in Shanghai, it's just like very, for any, for myself with like a Western European sensibilities, it's just like, it's horrifying. It's I see it, and I feel just anger at the government people who are doing this. And yeah, so that's a very strong example of a pathology of order, and a pathology of disorder. It might be a place like Somalia, which admittedly I haven't seen. I only know the news stories, but or it would be. It'd be like anarchy, like things breaking down, and yeah, these are the negative archetypes that we want to avoid, but we don't avoid the when we're oriented towards, say, the fear of the pathology of chaos, then we move unconsciously towards the pathologies of order, or we just move towards maximizing order because we see chaos or disorder as the enemy. Whereas, say we're afraid of authority, we can take that too far and be afraid of any sort of any type of authority or authority-like structure, like even leader, like and this sort of becomes the American cowboy thing, and like I think right now it's honestly looking like it has, like, quote unquote America's right in their individualism, in terms that they seem to have, like, in particular the states of, say, Texas, Florida, they've avoided lots of the corona madness, in that, like, that they weren't locking up doctors who were actually treating their patients, or like removing licenses. So in those states, you're still free to practice medicine if you're a doctor. But anyways, there's pathologies of order and pathologies of chaos, and our job isn't to say one is the way. It's to manage the dance between them. And so in polarity management, we talk about warning signs. So when we dip into the pathologies, there's warning signs. It's like if you dip into the pathologies of order, you start to feel like your voice isn't being heard. You feel like you're being controlled, and it doesn't feel good. But when you dip into pathologies of chaos, you feel like there's no direction. I don't know where I'm going. I feel lost. And so what the job is noticing when we dip into those areas, and then adjusting that, so we can make it positive. And so bringing it back to Agile in software, essentially what we're doing is we are making fast adjustments, and we're being very aware of the direction we're going in at any given moment. And so our cycles, these are typically like a month, where it's almost a whole process of planning, executing, and then reflecting on that. And that's very important, because often we're just stuck in execution mode, and we either don't do the planning before, and definitely any sort of foresight, like, that's extremely rare. Or not foresight, but looking back, like an after action thing. But just what that allows you to do is to keep learning from your process and keep optimizing the processes. So the reason why Toyota was able to become so much more effective than the American automakers, and deliver so much higher quality for competitive price, is because they have the very famous Toyota manufacturing system. Some people call it lean manufacturing or total quality management. It goes by different names like that. But basically, or Ikigai, continuous improvement. So what people in Toyota plants did was it's the responsibility of every worker to find possible improvements, and then to implement, because they all feel they feel just the culture is such that they're a part of the company. It's not like an American firm or even worse, an American union firm, where people come up for the paycheck. Because often that you know we can blame it on the worker all we want, but the reason why they just clock out is because they don't have a sense that they don't have a sense of ownership over the process. They're basically just hired to perform functions, and their voice isn't valued in the direction of the company. So, and that comes to the leadership style, which is very, I'm the leader. I'm right. You do what I say and shut up. That's basically the implicit assumptions of leadership in the American context. And yeah, Agile, it encompasses a lot of different shifts, but basically what I would say is that for any practice, there's a conventional set point, basically what is the norm, and then there's a post-conventional, or something beyond that. So we are very much like at the cusp of this, where we saw the flaws in convention, but we didn't know how we could do it differently. And because we assumed the conventions were right, then our dissatisfaction was just a kind of sense of ennui. And so when you actually see it from like the perspective of an alien, or you see it as an observer, like you're an ethologist, like someone in a nature documentary just watching things from a quote unquote objective point of view. Then you start to notice that things don't necessarily have to be the way they are. They did come that way because of reasons and contingencies, but there are other stable states in this landscape. And so moving to post-conventional, it's if you think of like things as a simulated annealing problem, or an optimization problem, where you have this landscape and you're trying to find minima. You can get stuck in a well, and you're not gonna leave that. But if you turn the temperature up, then you can search around the landscape and find something more optimal. And basically, the temperature rising, that's like discomfort, of course. You're moving around this landscape and you don't know where you're going, so it's very disorienting, for one. And you don't know why you're feeling this confusion, and you don't know why what worked before isn't working. That's because the landscape is shifting. And so, yeah, this is what we're in the midst of. And in terms of the corporate world, it looks like Agile, but in terms of there's lots of related social things, and I don't want to get into them now because I'm already at 25 minutes. But yeah, basically, what's happening is call it agile, call it nonviolent communication, call it whatever. There's just we're undergoing just a very radical shift in terms of how we see and how we act. And this may sound like very cliche, but it's it's like it's concrete in terms of the org charts of institutions becoming more flat, and some of it is of course pretense and marketing, but there are definitely steps in this, and like really there's tons of opportunity in bringing about this new world or laying the ground for it. And so, yeah, that's essentially what I wanted to talk about. I'm not gonna. That's what I'll end off on, because yeah, I just want to leave with a sense of opportunity, and the sense that the changes that are happening now, they are other people are experiencing, and it's a global thing. And I mean global in terms of like, well, it is across the world, but it's also across domain. Like it's in business, it's in people's relationships, it's in how we relate to the earth. It's in all of that. It's in everything. And yeah, I know lots of there's been millennialism long before there were millennials, and there have been previous I guess prophecies of this type. But yeah, those people, they were just really before their time. It's like a rain dance always works because you just keep dancing until it rains. So yeah, people keep saying you can look at past prophecies of this type and think that they were wrong, therefore it's not going to happen. You can also look at the internet. It was a bubble in the late 90s, but the internet didn't go away. That's the thing. Pets.com went away, but not the internet. Like the main thing, the most important thing stayed from that, and that's what's happening now. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of fluff, but there is also a core, and that core is really a shift in perception, and it takes many forms. But that's I'll leave that.